I originally tried to treat Shin Megami Tensei IV like Clash of Clans, and threw the ROM onto my phone using an emulator, operating under the naive assumption that I could treat this game like a casual, passive time killer. For the first hour or two, the illusion held. The game presents itself as an archaic, menu-driven dungeon crawler wrapped in a quaint medieval novel aesthetic. I thought I knew what I was in for. And then I hit the subquest demanding that I navigate the treacherous winding depths of Naraku to retrieve 3 pieces of green moss. Within a single 3-battle sequence, Shin Megami Tensei IV shattered my casual gaming habits and made me realize you cannot play this game passively. Every single random encounter was life or death. If I mismanaged a single turn, turned my brain off for a split second, or failed to predict an enemy's elemental affinity, my entire party had earth, wind, and fire smacked out of them before I could even register what went wrong. I literally stopped what I was doing, grabbed my phone charger, and transferred my 4-hour save file directly to my computer. I downloaded the high-definition texture pack by Aspen, upped the resolution to 4K, but even with the luxury of a massive monitor and the improved visual fidelity, Naruku broke my spirit because I fully didn't comprehend the game's internal economy or its psychological safety nets. I spent the next 4 hours paralyzed by survival anxiety. I was saving my game after every single random encounter. I was wandering completely blind through claustrophobic underground tunnels, utterly lost, going in endless, agonizing circles while my resources depleted. It was an incredibly exhausting, friction-heavy loop. Eventually, the mental fatigue won. I shut down the emulator, I walked away, and I firmly believed I would never pick up the game again. Yet, over the next few months, Shin Megami Tensei IV refused to leave my mind. And more than anything, I couldn't escape the music. It rejects the grand, sweeping orchestral romanticism that defines traditional JRPGs. It doesn't sound cozy, comforting, or adventurous. It's a brilliant, abrasive blend of heavy synthwave, industrial techno, dark ambient drone, and futuristic jazz. Personally, my top 3 video game soundtracks of all time have always been Final Fantasy XIII, Final Fantasy XV, and Nier Replicant, but those titles are massive cinematic orchestral triumphs where you can clearly trace their classical derivatives and see how they inspired the rest of the industry. SMT IV is an entirely different beast. There's absolutely nothing else like it. It is a flawless, avant-garde album masquerading as a handheld RPG. Every single track is a masterpiece that can stand entirely on its own merit outside of the context of the game. The cultural mystique surrounding Shin Megami Tensei IV is built entirely on a foundation of manufactured dread. Mainstream games journalism and insular internet forums have harmonized to award the franchise a singular reductionist title, the Dark Souls of JRPGs. It is a worn-out, lazy figure of speech, a piece of critical shorthand deployed whenever a turn-based game demands more than press X slot. Yet, despite how overused and played out that comparison has become, it remains an oddly apt description of how SMT IV feels during its introductory hours. It intentionally filters the casual observer, operating with a level of mechanical disrespect that feels alien in a modern landscape designed around seamless onboarding and instant gratification. In a broader JRPG landscape, turn-based combat has largely degenerated into a series of rote automated motion. Consider a franchise like Trails. In a standard Trails entry, the tactical depth of a basic encounter is virtually non-existent. No matter what elemental affinity or physical attack type you deploy, the enemy will inevitably fall as long as you maintain a consistent line of offense. You do not need to think, you simply need to execute your standard rotation until the health bar empties. It is a system built on a numerical attrition rather than tactical engagement. Shin Megami Tensei's wildly more popular spin-off Persona operates on the similar plane of accessibility, offering a loop that is frequently so forgiving that it borders on brain-dead easy. SMT IV's press turn and smirk mechanics completely upend this passivity. Hitting an enemy weakness or landing a critical blow grants your party an additional action icon. Missing an attack or hitting an element that the enemy absorbs completely strips away your turn, passing the momentum instantly to the opposition. The smirk mechanic acts as a compounding reward system for this optimization. granting a temporary mass boost to critical rates, evasion, and damage whenever a weakness is successfully exploited. This design forces a fundamental shift in player psychology. It makes every single move count. You can no longer afford to casually flip through menus while watching a video on another screen. You must actively scan the enemy's visual composition, deduce their elemental weakness, and manage your turn economy like a finite resource. The existence of a secret easy mode and the default difficulty paradox suggests an interesting historical context. SMT IV was built specifically for the Nintendo 3DS, a dedicated mobile platform. Atlus was hyper aware of the shifting nature of handheld gaming. They knew that a pure, uncompromising home console difficulty curve would alienate a player base looking to engage with a portable device on the move. They needed a structural compromise that preserved the ancient, hardcore lineage of the mainline brand while quietly accommodating the reality of the mobile consumption. When Atlus followed up with Shin Megami Tensei IV Apocalypse, they've leaned fully into this realization, offering an absurd 6 different difficulty settings right from the initial boot screen. It was a hilarious overt admission that the default brutality of the original game's tutorial had caused a massive systemic shock to the market. To understand why Shin Megami Tensei's community has mutated into one of the most vocally elitist subcultures on the internet, one has to analyze the modern phenomenon of the Atlus Larper. An Atlus Larper is a highly specific digital archetype, a commentator, internet forum regular, or a social media essayist who holds an intensely passionate, deeply protective stance on the narrative themes, philosophical alignments, and mechanical purity of the mainline Megaten titles. Despite having never actually played them, they watch multi-part YouTube retrospectives, scroll through exhaustive lore wikis, and listen to the soundtracks on Spotify, using that secondhand data to construct an elaborate online identity rooted in hardcore gaming credibility. This behavior is a natural consequence of our current cultural moment, the age of optimization. Every facet of modern life is systematically analyzed, streamlined, outsourced, and optimized for maximum speed and minimal friction. We optimize our workflows, our daily routines, our media consumption to squeeze the highest possible yield out of our dwindling attention span. In a landscape governed by the demand for instant gratification, the traditional JRPG is an incredibly inefficient vehicle for entertainment. A full playthrough of a mainline SMT title or AAA Persona game can easily demand anywhere from 40 to over 100 hours of active, high concentration mechanical investment. For a generation accustomed to rapid fire content delivery, that baseline requirement represents an immense barrier to entry. YouTube lore channels offer the ultimate optimization hack. Why spend 40 hours getting filtered by Naruku, getting lost in underground tunnels, managing inventory systems, and stressing over fusion calculators, when you can harvest the same exact narrative high, the exact same structural twist, and the exact same aesthetic clout from a well-produced 1-hour video essay? The lore channel synthesizes the messy, spread out, often obtuse storytelling of a traditional SMT game into a clean, succinct, cinematic narrative format. The immediate casualty of this optimization is the loss of a game's core identity. When you outsource a video game to a YouTube video, you are deleting the very component that makes the medium unique, the tactile, mechanical experience of play. You miss the visceral anxiety of staring at a party with 0 health points, praying your next attack doesn't trigger an enemy smirking loop. You miss the genuine hard-earned satisfaction of overcoming a structural wall through your own trial and error optimization. The Atlus Larper treats video games as purely narrative text to be cataloged and debated, completely detached from the mechanical stress that gives those narratives their weight. This creates a bleak, fragmented community dynamic. It creates a reality where the loudest voices defending or critiquing a franchise are entirely uncoupled from the actual reality of first-hand experience. It leads to situations where their streamer or a viewer will openly complain and declare, "Now it's time for the bad part," when the literal moment of a visual novel segment ends and the video game aspect begins. The gameplay is viewed as an annoying, arbitrary barrier that interrupts the passive consumption of content rather than the primary purpose of the medium's existence. The roots of this defensive gatekeeping subculture can be traced back to a massive corporate and artistic shift within Atlus itself. In 2016, Persona 5 exploded into a global cultural phenomenon, eventually soaring past millions of copies sold and completely redefining the public perception of the developer. To the broader gaming public, Atlus became the Persona devs, For the older insular fanbase of the mainline Shin Megami Tensei, this massive surge in mainstream popularity felt like an existential threat. They watched their dark, cold, philosophically complex, and mechanically unforgiving franchise get completely overshadowed by a hyper-stylized, vibrant high school social simulator that catered heavily to a wider, more casual audience. The phrase, "play a real Megaten game," was born out of this collective anxiety. It was a defensive reflex, a desperate attempt by mainline purists to preserve their artistic territory and protect their sense of core gaming identity. They looked at the massive influx of new casual Persona fans and felt like their interest was being fundamentally babyified for a mass market. To cope, they weaponized their mechanical friction of the games like SMT III Nocturne and SMT IV, transforming the difficulty of these titles into an exclusive badge of honor. They constructed an online narrative that positioned mainline Megaten as a dark, forbidden club reserved only for the deeply committed, creating a sharp boundary line to keep the casual Persona crowd at arm's length. The mathematical reality of this conflict exposes the profound absurdity of the gatekeeping narrative. Persona 5 sits at an astronomical sales bracket of over 8.6 million copies worldwide. Major high-profile global releases like Metaphor ReFantazio or Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance are celebrated by the company when they managed to clear roughly 2.4 million units. Mainline Shin Megami Tensei IV capped out at a lifetime sales figure of approximately 600,000 copies. The math reveals a massive structural disparity. SMT IV possesses the digital footprint and online conversational presence of a multi-million copy blockbuster, yet its actual player base is a tiny fraction of that size. The overwhelming majority of the people engaging with the SMT brand across online spaces, lore threads, and music comment sections are completely disconnected from the game itself. They are internet crusaders who keep the franchise relevant through pure digital noise, building a legendary reputation for a game they have only experienced secondhand. It is a community built on a paradox, a tiny, niche handheld title, elevated to the status of a hardcore internet myth by a legion of spectators who are too intimidated to actually play it.